What's up, guys? Welcome back down to Rhode Island. We are on site at our passive home build, and we got Brian checking some emails in between shoot.
You doing?
No, that's cool. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Most of the work that we're doing right today, because it's nice out, is outside. But when it's windy, when it's cold, when it's raining, we're getting a lot done on the inside. Not only our framers, but you, Julia, is also on site doing a lot of hands-on work, owner-architect. But I noticed today that you got all this paper kind of laid out. What do we got going on in here?
Julia wanted to make sure that before the plumber came in on Wednesday that we did some layout. And we did this on Thursday right on the wall over here, where we set up a center line on the floor in the shower, and then basically shot a laser level right up the wall, and started marking all these, the T-stat, the volume, the diverter, and the shower head. That piece of plywood came down, and then the framer, built in the shower niche over here. So this is built out to 2x6.
Gotcha.
So that she could have the shower niche next to it, and then we made it so that we could put the plywood right back up. And the other piece that went in was the curb. So we put the curb in. Now that we have the curb, we can set the drain in the floor.
Right, and this was actually, a lot of times we do a curbless shower,
Yep.
But Julia had preferred to do a curb shower, which is why we're doing a curb shower. But it's important, like you have everything laid out here. All of the dimensions are here. The plumber could realistically measure and lay out everything.
They could.
But, we're trying to be, proactive with them, where it's like, hey, listen, we want to make your job as easy as possible. Let's get everything laid out, put on the plywood. But this plywood's actually going to come down entirely. This is just for their location, basically, so they can drill through, get everything in that position, know that, this probably also represents like a tile backer board. So they have that thickness, pull that down, and everything's right in the exact right position.
Yeah, there's another component too where, our HVAC guys are here putting ductwork all over the place. And, these illustrations are on the wall. We're marking very prominently with marker, just because we want to make sure that, it's, I don't know if it's necessarily top of mind, but, when they're about to run something, they know they may hit, a drain in the floor.
Yeah.
So if we even have a hole drilled in the floor ahead of them, they would know, okay, I shouldn't run something here, so we avoid some conflicts.
And I guess what's been your motive of communicating between those trades? So electrician, we're gonna wait for last because wiring is a little bit easier to locate. But ductwork, we typically start with because it's the largest. But you've had some conversation with the plumber that the plumber was worried about certain aspects of his scope not being able to be installed.
Yep. I think one of the great things about our HVAC sub is they're not afraid to call the other trades.
Yeah.
So they're actually known for being, in great communication with the electrician. Mm-hmm. It's great that they're clear on who's going to do the low voltage,
Sure.
And so we gave the number of the plumber to them, and their ductwork guy is going to call him and make sure he coordinates. So it's having those mechanical trades contact each other directly. I think that's just amazing that they're willing to do that. They're willing to talk to each other. They don't have to always go through us.
Right, and at the end of the day, like keeping us in the loop and keeping us in the middle, where we still, like, you're active on site every day, so you're in the loop, knowing what's going on, and if they're coordinating a specific detail or like making sure that they're thinking about the next trade, that's okay. So shout out to AGS, they're doing a great job. They got the 2 air handlers down installed in the basement. One has some ductwork on it, really clean work. And like you just mentioned about the low voltage, a pet peeve of mine is when the low voltage wiring isn't in a clean conduit or something like that. And before you even said anything, they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna run this in conduit up the wall." They thanked you for putting up that painted plywood, because it does look better when it's all said and done. But let's go outside of the garage, because we've actually made some changes to the garage, the way we were framing it, from the original way that it was drawn. So originally, this was going to be framed with 2x6 walls, similar to the house. We're gonna wrap this, and we're gonna add exterior insulation on the outside of that. That's changed, right?
Yes.
What was the main reason for that?
The main reason was it was more of a cost-cutting measure. There's a lot to that assembly, obviously. You know, a lot of materials, and a garage.
Shout out to everyone telling us that we're using too many materials on this job. Yeah.
I mean, you know, some of it, you know, we couldn't do anything about it because you know we're hanging shingling on the wall, and we can't just use furring strips.
Yeah, because just to repeat, like this has 2 layers of Rockwool insulation. It has a fiberglass. You guys have asked a lot of times. That Ziegler is a fiberglass product, so we don't have that thermal transfer. But then we're adding a 1/2-inch plywood on top of that. There's a lot of steps there to get that exterior sweater on this home really installed, and the garage was really going to see no benefit to it. You know, it still can be insulated from, you know, what is now a 2x8 cavity.
Yeah, and it's not part of like the main building envelope. I mean, the building envelope, it goes, you know, it's like a jacket around the building, obviously, and it goes down into the basement there, and it goes right across. And here, you know, we don't have to worry as much in the blower door tests about how that performs.
Right.
So we can go to more of a traditional framing. I mean, I know we're using you know thicker lumber here, but
yeah. So we switched to a 2x8 wall, which essentially, you know, what we've actually done is it was going to be a 2x6 with 3 inches of insulation
on the outside. Yep.
But now we're actually extending our wall out that 3 inches. And overlapping. So if you look at this outside 2x, it actually lines down with our Rockwool down there.
Right.
And that's going to give us our outside sheathing layer, which
get it
would
all in
then
the same
be
plane. Yep.
And you know, I'd actually asked Chris right before the video why this was all pressure treated, and he's going to be hanging that deck on it. So he said, you know what, for the short run it makes sense to switch this to pressure treated. But they're also stick framing it, which, you know, like basically framing it in place and not standing up these walls. And that's largely due to the way that Julia has designed it, you know, this complete open roof system. And eventually there's going to be a loft in there, is that right?
Yeah, for storage, yep.
So there'll be a storage loft. That's above the garage door?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's been some coordination with Eric over at Designer Garage Doors to make sure that that door, you know, I think the track was a big question as to like where that track was going to end up.
Yeah, the motor mount, whether it was on the side or the top, it changed how much headroom was given to us for that loft.
Yeah. So just to, you know, Brian said a couple minutes ago, this is outside of our envelope. This is our main body of the home. And then this right here is a breezeway. So once this is framed and sheathed and everything else, we'll actually connect it with a roof. And then this, what you see with concrete there, will be the decking that runs all the way around and throughout. Brian, you had talked about a detail back here. These holes in the soffit, what's going on with these?
So we have some can lights that their height just needs a little more headroom, I guess you would say.
So before we get into that, what's the finish? What is this finish?
This finish is going to be like a cedar shiplap, and in order to set it at the right height, there's going to be furring strips underneath where you see the Siga My Vest, and so that's where the can lights are going to be, you know, recessed into. And so what we're going to have is inside of each of these boxes, there's going to be we're going to use like some 2x3s on the flat with some plywood. We're going to just create a recess that we continue the envelope into. You know, we'll tape it and use, you know, maybe some scrap pieces of My Vest, and then the wiring will just go, you know, behind it.
Right, and because this is, you know, direct penetration into our envelope.
It is.
And this is something that we kind of figured out later on.
Right.
You know, with our actual lighting device.
Yep.
And like you said, you're going to build that box and create an airtight box.
Exactly.
In efforts to keep that continuous.
Yep.
I also noticed you guys made some notches in these the soffit framing since I've last been here. What is this all about?
Basically, what this is going to house is a roller shade tight up against the glass. It drops down in front of the hardware, and just beyond that roller shade is going to be a plenum for a linear duct grill.
So just for reference, guys, our door is here. So our door in our glass system is outboard of this steel. Just to remind you guys, this is a temporary wall. So what Brian's saying is this right here is going to be a roller shade that drops down in front of that glass, and then we're going to have a continuous plenum that goes the entire length, and this is for the HVAC. So that means that HVAC duct has to go up over that steel, and then you're going to have a trunk line on this side, which is why you guys frame that soffit.
There'll be a few flex ducts that
Yep.
are going kind of jumping over that structural beam.
And you know, in a normal situation, if we didn't have exterior insulation, it would be maybe a slight concern that you're going to have, you know, a loss of insulation in that cavity. But the reality is, we have 6 inches of insulation on the roof as well.
Yeah.
And the bad insulation. So those micro moments that are going to lose, you know, some R value because of the flex duct are really minimal. What else we got going on?
Kind of along the lines of this, an interesting detail that it's a little hard to explain, but like we have the recesses here, we're going to have a downspout that comes off of the gutter that gets carved into.
I'm going to take my pointing
into this soffit here, and it's going to come down the wall.
So you're going to have your outside. We talked about those gutters. I'm using my pointing.
Yeah.
the Duragutta.
Yeah.
Right. Duragutta. That's my boss.
Duragutta.
Duragutta. And then you're saying your downspout's going to run tight against this wall and then down.
Yep. And part of that downspout's just going to get buried in the insulation. And again, I know it's compromising, you know, some of that continuous insulation.
Right.
But not too bad, we don't think. I mean, it's just I think it's a 2x3.
Right.
Is that downspout?
And you know, the argument can be had, like, these are like your overall continuous insulation, but there will be times like here where you lose a little bit, and it's similar to, like, well, you have a punched opening right here too that's glass.
Right.
It's not going to perform nearly as well as that wall assembly either. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about what your effective R value is, right? So the windows sort of impact that. They're the lowest common denominator. I know they're triple pane window, but what are we talking? I don't remember, an R7 maybe.
Right, exactly. So on that wall, which is, I think, close to an R40, if not higher than that, you know, it really doesn't, it's really a minimal impact when you're all said and done.
Yep.
Similar to the blocking down here that, you know, is essentially holding our deck brackets. You know, you're effectively losing some R value around that, but it's minimal again.
And you brought the attention to the deck brackets. Julia, the architect, again did an amazing job with the Proseco, and we're going to be putting an additional layer of Proseco over those brackets to kind of, you know, seal up those bolt heads.
Oh, good.
Yep.
I wasn't aware. I was not aware that you guys were going to do that, but it makes sense. You might as well. It's going to get buried.
Just encapsulate the whole thing.
Right. And one of the questions that came up in a previous video is why we cut the plywood out. And the reason that we cut the plywood out is because the sheathing, prior to us adding the blocking on top, that wasn't our original intent. But the sheathing was padded off some of the framing behind, especially on that continuous LVL, because we had metal brackets and things like that that were holding that LVL up.
Yeah.
So rather than haunching out the sheathing, Chris and team actually padded out the sheathing. So if we had bolted these LVL brackets directly to that sheathing, in some spots it would actually be hollow behind. So it made sense to just cut it out.
Chris has also had plenty of experience with these brackets, and he's noticed that if they're installed, you know, to the sheathing as opposed to the framing lumber, that they tend to squash.
Oh, interesting.
The sheathing a little bit. It compresses.
Yeah.
So it's just a more solid connection.
Cool.
This way.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to see the garage go up, and like you said, you're going to be getting this thing sheathed, getting this thing wrapped up, and then tying in our breezeway.
Absolutely.
We'll see you guys next week.